In 2014, Zak Bagans, host of Discovery Channel's Ghost Adventures, purchased a small one-story home in Gary, Indiana, so that he could make a documentary. The lure came from when the house made national attention as being dubbed the portal to hell, when its tenants years prior claimed demons were taking up residence alongside them. Some believe the story was fabricated, while others, including a 37-year veteran of the Gary Police Department, believed it. The events that unfolded led to one of the most unusual cases that Department of Children's Services had ever handled. But this story ends with Zak's documentary. It begins with a single mother and her 3 children. This is the possession of the Ammons family.
Welcome to another episode of Hosting Evil. I'm Emily.
And I'm Jess. And Emily, I have a case for you today that I resonated with as a mom. So it really struck a chord with me.
I can't wait for you to share this.
So I'm going to jump back and forth between the documentary and the original story because there was some speculation with this story. And the documentary was filmed years after. So I think it's important because things happened in the documentary that corroborated the original story.
And before you get started, can I just say,
Do you love Zak Bagans?
No, I've never heard of this before.
Really?
I'm not Ghost Hunters. What's he?
Ghost Adventures.
Okay. Admittedly, I didn't have TLC
or Discovery
Channel. So I mean, I would watch that stuff, but it would be like when I was at someone else's house. So be excited because you're really going to blow my socks off. And also, I love documentaries, so I'm kind of kicking myself.
It's a 2-in-1. Well, and it's funny, too, because I have watched many seasons of Ghost Adventures. I love Zak. I love the team that he has. And when I picked this case, I didn't know that Zak covered it and made a documentary.
Oh,
so my mind was also blown, just in a different way.
Cool.
So the original story takes place from 2011 to 2012 in Gary, Indiana. So Gary was once a manufacturing mecca, but those days had long gone. A report named Gary being one of the most miserable cities in America to live.
Yikes.
And it was ranked high as being one of the most unsafe as well. So this makes the residents vulnerable. And as we know, demons and dark forces love to prey on the vulnerable. It's just their thing. So LaToya Ammons was a single mom of 3 school-age children. She had 2 sons and a daughter and was looking for a fresh start coming out of a relationship. So what do? You move.
Sure. Okay.
That's what you do. So, or if you have to.
Yeah,
because,
that's true.
Said relationship ended. So she found a cute 1-story rental and moved her children along with her mother onto Carolina Street in the dead of winter.
Okay.
So Gary, Indiana winters are brutal. They have below freezing temps with mostly cloudy days, and the winter in 2011 was no exception. So this is...
No, that was a tough winter.
Very tough.
On the East Coast.
Yeah, it was brutal everywhere. But this was important to note because of some things that started happening after they moved in. And I'm going to refer to LaToya's mom as Grandma just to differentiate between the 2 women as I tell the story. So when they moved in, they noticed swarms of huge black flies, like by the droves in their screened-in front porch.
This already screams Amityville.
Yeah.
Continue.
Red flag number 1. So the ladies would kill the flies, spend all this time killing them. The next day, boom, right back.
Yep.
So they were reported as saying, well, especially Grandma, that wasn't normal.
Yeah, you don't have flies during winter, too.
Well, it's one of the great things about winter is you get a break from the goddamn bugs. They're dead. You shouldn't be seeing a fly, let alone swarms of huge black. I mean, that's like when you think of like a dead carcass, those big flies
those like
come.
horse flies.
Yeah, no, you shouldn't be seeing that in below freezing temps.
No.
So after that, they noticed some other strange occurrences. After midnight, Latoya and her mom would often hear footsteps ascending the basement stairs,
Okay.
followed by the basement door creaking as it opened into the kitchen. Now, this was a small house.
Right.
The
So
bedrooms were right outside the kitchen,
you hear
so
everything.
yeah, if something's happening, you're gonna hear it no matter where you are in the house.
That's a nightmare.
Yeah, definitely. So one night, grandma claims she awoke to find a shadowy figure of a man pacing in front of her bed.
Ugh.
So she flipped the F out, jumped up, turned on the light, and all she found in its place was wet boot prints that had just been where the shadowy figure was.
Oh, no.
So another thing, which you won't be shocked to know this, they would hear dogs barking and growling
Of
coming from
course.
inside the house, but guess what? They didn't have any pets.
Of course not. Not
No.
even a Lhasa Apso to blame it
Nope,
on.
nothing. And it was interesting too because during the documentary with Zach, when he was filming, reports of hearing dogs growling would come from like the crew and those he was interviewing. They would hear
Oh,
it. And
shit.
some other things happen with the dogs growling that we'll talk about later. So you have that similarity
Yeah.
between, because again, this is 2011.
Mhm.
Zach purchased the house in 2014 and filmed for 4 years.
Okay.
So this is years later. People are still hearing the growling coming
Yeah.
from within this house. So things in the Ammons house started to escalate quickly after this. One night, the family was up late mourning the loss of a loved one with a small group of friends. At one point, Grandma was in the kitchen with those friends, and around 2 a.m., a loud scream came from her bedroom. She recognized the sound as being her daughter, Latoya.
Oh,
So
no.
grandma ran into the room to find Latoya screaming and staring at her 12-year-old daughter who was levitating feet above the bed.
Oh, shit.
Another little girl was in the bed too. That was like what friend, like a daughter of
Friend.
one of those friends,
Yeah,
and
or
was just like
cousin.
staring blankly at this girl. And she was completely unconscious while she was levitating.
Right.
So scared and not knowing what to do, everyone who was in the house gathered around the girl and started to pray. They were
Okay.
religious.
Yeah.
Eventually, Latoya's daughter descended back onto the bed, and when she woke again, she had no idea what had happened to her. So, those who were visiting that night, though, refused to come back to that house again. Rightly so. I don't blame them.
But also, like, this possession is, like, coming in hot.
It's coming in like swinging
We're
out the
ready,
gates.
like, no n a couple small things and then,
Boom, we're
full
in it to win it.
blown.
So after this, Latoya and Grandma reached out to a few local churches for help. Like, unsure, they didn't know what was going on, but they knew it wasn't good.
Good, yeah.
They knew it was like negative. So most of the churches dismissed what the ladies were saying.
Of course.
Yep.
And this is I wonder if even, like, kinda Bible Belt.
But one church did listen to them and offered some guidance. The officials at this church urged the two women to, quote, cleanse the house with bleach and ammonia.
Okay.
I mean, I knew those items killed germs, did not know they got rid of demons. And they also urged the ladies to use olive oil and draw crosses on every door and window, their foreheads, while reciting prayer. So I guess Latoya, being intelligent, didn't want to rely solely on that
Mhm.
advice. So she continued, to seek out some more. And she saw a local clairvoyant
Okay.
who told them that their house was under attack by more than 200 demons.
Yikes.
Portal to hell. That's where that
Yeah.
name came from, in case you didn't connect the dots there.
Makes sense.
Latoya asked the clairvoyant, okay, like, well, what do I do? So the clairvoyant suggested the best course of action wasn't the bleach, but was to, quote, get the hell out of there.
I was just gonna say, GTFO.
But moving wasn't an option, right? So this is a
Yeah.
poverty-stricken area. Latoya had just spent all of her money on rental deposits. She couldn't afford to just up and move. Like, she was financially strapped and literally stuck there. So the clairvoyant suggested she make an altar in the basement and burn sage and sulfur. To anyone listening, let me just put my own logical and intuitive sense on this. Sage is really great for negative energy, meaning like you have a toxic friend who's visiting, they leave, the room is left heavy. Burn some sage, you'll probably feel better and lighter. If your house has 1+ demons in it, sage is not going to help you. It's just
Also,
not.
I'm sorry, you're supposed to burn sulfur?
Sulfur, it was funny because isn't that
That's the
scent that, like, when demons are there, you
that
always smell
they
sulfur.
claim it smells like sulfur,
Maybe
and
it's like, "Let's get them first before they get you." I don't really know what the
that would be like making them feel at home. That would be like,
welcoming them.
yeah, like, you invite one of your baker friends over and you
Lure
burn,
them with
like,
vanilla.
yeah, like, with vanilla or, like, a cinnamon roll, candle. You're like, Come
Yeah,
join us before we kick you out."
I don't know why the clairvoyant said sulfur, so please, if you're
Okay.
listening, do not do that to get out the demons. If you want demons, I'm sure sulfur's the way to go. Latoya described how, after all this advice, she went home and she did everything. I mean, you're
Yeah.
desperate, right? So you're going to do
Yeah.
whatever these people tell you. So she drew crosses on the doors, windows, and even the foreheads of their children and themselves with olive oil. She covered an end table with a white sheet. She placed white candles on it and statues of Mary, Joseph, and Jesus on it. She then read the following aloud: "You will not fear the terror of night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, nor the plague that destroys midday." Leave it to the Bible to scare the shit out of you. So that's Psalm 91, ladies and gentlemen. So that's what the clairvoyant and the church told her to do.
Okay.
So after this, things calmed down for a few days. It was a
Oh,
false sense of calm.
of
As we know,
course.
demons love to play tricks.
Yeah.
They see this vain little attempt at getting rid of them, and they quiet for a while just to catch you off guard when they come
Yeah.
in full swinging. That's exactly what they did here.
And build up that fervor.
Absolutely. So at this time, Latoya's daughter was 12. So she's
Okay.
12 years old, and her sons are 7 and 9. So Latoya noticed after this false sense of calm came that there were changes taking place in the children. Their voices would suddenly deepen to an unnatural level when they
Oh,
spoke,
shit.
followed by these evil smiles and bulging eyes. We saw the bulging eyes in Emma Schmidt's
Yeah,
case,
that's
those
true,
protruding
yeah.
eyes. Grandma, though, felt like she was born protected by a guardian so that none of this affected her.
Good for
Not really
grandma.
sure that's an actual thing, but we'll just go with it because that's what she believed. Like, I feel like if one of us is born with a guardian, we most likely all are. I don't know where she got off thinking. I don't know who told her that.
But maybe it's, like, the opposite of, like, when they like, in the one case with Emma Schmidt when she was cursed,
Yeah,
maybe it's, like, the
she's
grandma
blessed,
was, like,
doubly
protected,
blessed.
yeah.
Hey,
I would
maybe,
believe that.
maybe.
I can stand behind that.
So one of the boys would be found at various times sitting in a closet having a dark conversation with what he described as another little boy, but obviously there was no other little boy there. I mean, it was the spirit he was talking to,
Yeah.
but they would have these conversations and the spirit boy would be telling him what it's like to die, and
Oh,
that's what they would
great.
be discussing in the closet.
That's fun.
Stuff of horror movies.
Yeah, literally.
So Latoya witnessed her other son also get thrown out of the bathroom violently by an unseen force
Great.
and get thrown up against the wall as well.
Oh, no.
So her 12-year-old daughter would later tell mental health professionals that she oftentimes felt like she was being choked and would lose the ability to move or speak. We've also seen this in
Yeah.
other cases as well. She also heard voices telling her she was never going to see her family again and would be dead within 20 minutes, causing her to live in like a constant state of fright. I mean, you're 12.
Anxiety, yeah.
Like that's
That's
terrifying as an adult to hear, let alone a 12-year-old. And once the daughter had gotten hit over the head with a headboard by an
okay.
unseen force, but it was so hard that it actually caused her to need stitches.
Oh my god. Ugh, and then CPS is getting involved,
Yeah.
like,
Oh, yeah.
"Oh, this is bad."
So some nights it was so bad that the family would leave and go to a hotel or stay with relatives just to get a break. But obviously, the issues would sometimes follow because it's not really that. I mean, it emanated from the house, but now it's attached to them.
Right, yeah.
So Latoya herself started experiencing feelings of getting warm, followed by being lightheaded. And then she would start to like violently shake. And she felt like this would happen when she was under spiritual attack by the demons.
Mm,
Jumping to Zak's documentary, he noted that when members of his crew, himself even, or people he brought in to be interviewed were at the house, they would just start to space out. lose track of thought, and then it would be followed by either a feeling of getting sick or angry.
Oh,
And
no.
he attributed this to the same thing Latoya had experienced a few years prior, which is that spiritual attack.
Yeah.
So disturbances in the house with Latoya and the family continued with the kids. They would be sitting there completely fine, for example, playing video games, and then all of a sudden one of the kids' eyes would roll back into their head. They would speak in that deep demonic voice, one time saying something to the other like, "Are you ready to go, brother?" Then the other boy's eyes would roll back in his head and he would respond, "Yes, I am ready to go."
Oh my god, what?
The kids would then get violent with each other
Oh,
right after.
no!
Isn't that crazy?
Oh, no! I'm laughing because this is terrifying.
9 and
What?
7.
Oh my god. I mean,
Like, playing Mario Brothers, I don't know what kids play, like Donkey Kong, whatever, and then all of a sudden, it's just, that deep, dark voice.
kids do spooky shit, but that's
That's
terrifying.
next level. Kids do
Yeah.
spooky shit in the middle of the night when, like, you wake up and they're just staring at you and like, "I have to pee." It's like, "Then go. Why are you staring at me?" But that is like
Oh my god.
so
No.
Latoya was witnessing this and was like, "Hell no. I
Yeah.
need to get these kids to a doctor." So she contacted the family physician in the hopes of getting more help and took the whole family, grandma and all, in to see him.
Okay.
So Dr. Jeffrey Onyekuwo would later say in an interview that, quote, "I've never heard anything like that in my life. I was scared myself when I walked into the room. It was bizarre." Rightly so. Because, I mean, they're doing these behaviors at the
The
doctor's
doctors? Yeah,
office.
I mean, at least he was up with it.
Well,
I don't
his
know.
medical notes from that day included phrases like delusions of ghost in home and hallucinations. So, yeah, it was freaky behavior, but he wasn't
Oh.
100% on board with the story, and this is where things start to take a turn. So,
Yeah.
one of the sons started speaking in that demonic voice and started cursing and yelling at the doctor. And according to reports from that day, the 7-year-old was then lifted and thrown into the wall with nobody touching him. But they were still like, mm. So Dr. Jeff thought, this is being done by mom. She's putting these kids up to this. She's having them put
Oh
on a
my
show for
god.
attention.
Like
They thought that they were
Munchausen's by
acting.
proxy, like,
Yeah, I don't know
to the
where he would
extreme
get
or
that from,
something?
but yeah, he thought they were acting. So, not to brag, but I took acting lessons from an extra on the movie Philadelphia with Tom Hanks when I was Latoya's kid's age. Even with that lovely skill set, if my mom came up to me and was like, "Hey, could you act like, you're possessed by demons in front of multiple medical professionals?" Even if I wanted to do it, I probably would have only been able to keep up with it for, like, a minute before I broke character because you're
You're a
watching these
kid, wouldn't they be
adults.
laughing?
Well, yeah, you would be laughing when you start to see the adults responding to whatever nonsense you're doing.
Right, yeah. I mean, basically mm,
I mean, here's the thing though, there's prank shows out there, right? Where they hire
yes,
actors
yeah,
so that
yeah,
they can continue and not break character so that the person being pranked doesn't get led on. Like, it takes a
yeah,
special skill. These
right.
kids were not actors.
This isn't Jackass.
No, and
Right.
going back to financially strapped, like, I'm sure acting lessons were not a priority. These
Yeah,
kids were
right.
not at the theater. They did not have the skill set to be able to pull this off. So that's my opinion on that. So they're at the doctor's, the kids are starting to lose it, and one of the medical staff called 911.
Okay.
So, things were escalating, but you also have to remember what was happening in the home was also causing the kids to miss school.
Of
So the
course.
medical professionals are watching this display. They're noting the education piece is
Yeah.
lacking, and they're like, "We want to have her investigated for child abuse." Is
Yep.
basically why they
Yeah.
called. So
This sucks.
yeah, and mom is just like caught in the middle of this.
Yeah.
So several cop cars and ambulances show up, and they take the whole family, again, grandma and all, to the hospital. So at the hospital, the boys were still talking about violence, wanting to kill. The family was assigned a DCS, Department of Children's Services case manager to interview the kids and the family. So Valerie Washington was the manager assigned to this family. And when she was speaking with them, the 7-year-old began growling and showing his teeth just like a dog would.
Ugh.
His eyes then rolled back in his head, and he immediately locked both hands around his older brother's throat and started to choke him.
Oh my
The report
god.
stated that it took multiple adults to break free because of his unusual strength. Again, we see that in these possession cases, the ability to have this strength that's not normally there. I mean, this kid's 7.
Right. But also too, like, this is the thing that's so crazy about everything you're telling me right now is, like, this just recently happened. I mean, recent is relative, but, like, this has happened within the last, like,
Yeah.
10 to 15
Yeah, it's
years.
not an old
We're not talking about, like,
case.
something in, like, 1500.
No, like, this is relatively recent in relation to all the other cases. And I guess you're starting to get medical professionals involved
Yeah.
and DCS. So Valerie's watching this and she decided she wanted to speak with the boys without mom present. She knew what the theory was from the medical professionals. So she moved the 2 boys into another room but allowed grandma to come.
Okay.
So it's Valerie, the case manager, the 2 boys' grandma, and ER nurse Willie Lee Walker, and a hospital psychologist were also present in the room. So once they got into the room, the 7-year-old again locked eyes with his brother and started to growl. And then the demonic voice came through saying, "It's time to die. I will kill you," to the brother.
Great.
So while the 7-year-old did this, the 9-year-old brother he was speaking to starts headbutting his grandma several times in the stomach. Now, these kids were close to her. This
Right.
was not normal behavior for
Yeah.
them to be doing. So grandma grabbed the 9-year-old's hands and started praying for him.
Oh my gosh.
What happened next was in the official DCS case notes written by Valerie and was corroborated by ER nurse Walker as well as the hospital psychologist.
Right.
Okay. So, according to Valerie's notes, which, by the way, total DCS case notes were 800 pages on this
Oh
family.
my god.
So, while grandma was still holding the 9-year-old's hands and praying for him, an evil grin came across the boy's face. He lunged backwards, glided across the floor, and proceeded to walk up the wall toward the ceiling backwards.
What?
He then did what was described as a flip coming off the wall, landed right on his feet in front of everyone, and then passed out.
Oh my god.
How crazy is that?
You can't explain that.
Like, he's 9. He's not like he's doing one of those parkour things.
Yeah.
So all the medical professionals in the room lost it. They just were like, "What did I just see?"
Yeah.
And they actually ran out of the room. They just couldn't handle it. It was just too much for their brains to
I can kind
comprehend.
of understand.
So, I guess the ER doctor found out what had happened, and he ran back into the room and demanded that the boy do it again, but the nurse that was there was like, he was not himself when he did that. He's not going to be able to do it on command."
Right.
And it just was this explosion of flurry in the hospital, and that's actually
Mhm.
how news spread amongst the staff, and then it was somehow picked up by the local news station
Of
and then
course.
spread like wildfire and was actually being reported by every single media outlet. Like, this made national attention. Where the hell you and I were when this I have no idea, but
I was in college being
I
an
didn't hear
idiot.
about it. I had, like, had no awareness of this whatsoever, so I'm sure other people out there listening didn't either, but apparently it was reported,
That's
all
crazy.
over, and that's
Yeah.
actually how Zach found out about it was
Okay.
watching the news. So Zach actually was able to interview Valerie, the DCS case manager, in his documentary, and he asked her if she still believed in the events of that day now that she's had a few years to reflect. And she said, quote, "What happened that day is beyond what the capabilities are of what a 9-year-old can do."
Yeah.
And she said actually even thinking about that day puts her right back in that moment. She described it as being very traumatic. So this is actually coming from a woman who primarily worked in child fatalities. She had seen horrible, horrible ways in which children died, but that day sealed the deal for her. Right after she quit her job and moved out of Indiana. She
I
could
bet.
not wrap her brain around what she saw.
Yeah,
It made her question everything, she said.
right, and then she probably needed to go to a therapist
Yeah. Oh, I'm
for
sure.
PTSD. Yeah.
So, yes, she still believed in the events of that day, and it impacted her greatly. So, I mean, that's a credible witness if I've ever heard one, because usually our witnesses are priests, nuns, or family members or close family friends. But
Right.
when you have DCS involved here
Like
and
a
you see the
legitimate
impact.
caseworker
Mhm.
that's probably seen, like, the worst of the
Yep.
worst.
And the ER nurse
Right,
who didn't know this family from
right.
anything, and the hospital psychologist.
Yeah, that's
That's a lot of credible
ugh,
eyewitness accounts there.
yikes.
So Latoya spent the night in the hospital with her 7-year-old son that night while grandma took the other two to a relative's house. The next day was actually the 7-year-old's 8th birthday.
Oh,
I know, it's a terrible way to say goodbye to your 7-year-olds. And DCS officials asked grandma to bring the other two back to the hospital, presumably to talk more about what had happened the day before. So once everyone was there, they celebrated the boy's birthday by eating cake and singing happy birthday. Then DCS told them that the children wouldn't be going home as they took the emergency step of taking custody of the children without a court order.
shit.
So Valerie stated in her report that all the children were experiencing both spiritual and emotional distress. And the family was obviously really upset because they felt like they had already been through so much together and now they were getting ripped
Separate,
apart.
yeah.
So the day after all this happened, meanwhile, the hospital chaplain called on Reverend Mike Magino to carry out an exorcism on both the children and Latoya.
Okay.
I give him credit because I don't know. He just probably heard the story and was
Yeah,
thinking, like, I need to help this family.
yeah.
So, Reverend Magino performed 2 exorcisms on the family. There's not much out there on the actual exorcism, unfortunately, but we know it seemed to work.
Okay.
So, the children returned to Latoya 6 months later when the problems subsided. By this point, Latoya had moved out of the house and she reported no further issues with herself or the kids.
Wow.
So after Latoya moved out, obviously the landlord had new tenants come in, and it is
Mhm.
important to note that they didn't report anything
Right.
unusual. Okay, so jump ahead. In 2014, the house went up for sale officially,
Mhm.
and Zach bought the house sight unseen. He
Okay.
knew about the
Well,
home,
yeah.
and he was like, I gotta have it.
Yeah.
And the first time he went to the house was when he started filming the documentary about it. So the first time he saw it was the first time you get to see his reaction to seeing it in the documentary.
Wow.
So during the documentary, Zach met with Captain Charles Austin, who was originally involved in this case because the kids weren't attending school.
Right.
He told Zach that in his 37 years of police investigation, he never ran into anything like this before. He was one of the ones originally who believed Latoya created this like story to try to get attention, maybe money, but he
Mhm.
ended up witnessing a lot of the behaviors that were previously described, the demonic voices, the violent tendencies, and he said he became a believer. Especially when one time after he had been at the home, he drove about a mile down to a gas station when all of a sudden the AM FM radio in his squad car changed channels to static and a
Mhm.
voice came through asking who was there. And he
Mm.
was like, hell no. It freaked him out and he knew it had something to do with the house.
Right.
He said a lot of officers that were called to the home for various reasons would quit the force after being involved with the house because things would follow them home,
Oh my
and their
god.
spouses would even report issues.
That's
Not long, just
yeah.
enough to eyebrow raise you, right? And so
Right.
it had this reputation even amongst the local officers.
Mm.
So Zach tried to interview Latoya and her
Mhm.
mom, but they refused because he had just been in the quote demon house
Mhm.
prior to reaching out to them, and they were fearful that the demons were, like, latched on to Zach and would be transferred from him back to them, like, they did not want to have any part of anyone that had been in that house.
Totally reasonable.
Yeah, I would especially after knowing that, they'd had some peace for a number of
Right,
years, why would you
yeah.
open yourself back up
Like,
to
if
that
you've
again?
escaped it, fuck it.
Yeah, just peace out and don't talk to anyone who has ever been there. So Zach was able to interview Latoya's brother, though, who they were currently living with him, and he talked about how during the possessions, going back a couple years, Latoya and the kids stayed with him a few days, and he personally witnessed how the children would go from that normal behavior to disturbed conversations in these strange voices. He said the kids would start to chant as if the demon was going from kid to kid. So, like, the
Oh
one kid
my
would start to chant,
gosh.
it would stop, and it would pick up with the next one and the next one.
I gotta say, these demons are so freaking creative.
They are. Like, they're always finding new ways to just baffle us. And he also recalled that, these kids were mild-mannered kids. They loved their grandmother, but they would get verbally abusive toward her,
Yeah.
maybe because she was protected. I don't
Yeah,
know. Maybe
right.
it's just a
That would
theory.
make sense.
And he said this was not normal for them. So they would
Right.
get violent with each other. They'd get violent with the grandma. They would get verbally abusive. And he said it was a lot to handle.
Well, and if you think about it, it's like even like how the demons within one person might fight each other,
Oh yeah,
you
they're always
know?
they're always arguing.
It's like the one demon and one kid's fighting against another demon. And then too with the grandmother, it's like the way that a demon might react when a priest comes, if you're protected.
Yep. Because they weren't really there wasn't many reports about them being violent with mom.
Right.
She was experiencing her own sort of feelings and issues, like she was under some sort of I would say she was more under like that oppressive.
Yeah, like
Um,
obsession level of possession, like
yeah.
not full
Yeah, I don't think she was fully
blown.
possessed, but she definitely had that oppressiveness. She would be affected by the energy. So after Zach's interview with Latoya's brother, Latoya refused to let the brother back in the house.
Oh shit.
She was like, "Nope, you're on my shit list too,"
You
and like wouldn't
screwed.
let him.
Yeah. Well, I can kind of understand.
So when Zach was filming the documentary, but not currently at the house, he received a call from one of the neighbors that he'd kind of befriended that someone was trying to break into the house.
Okay.
And even though the house was vacant, I mean, squatters had been kind of living there. He was in the process of getting them kicked out. So he called the police and met them out there. And so
Mhm.
this is like years after Latoya.
Right.
And the two cops that showed up, he's like, "Yeah, I got a report that someone's trying to break into the house." And they looked at the house and they're like, "No, we're not going in there. Good luck."
I
They
f
know about it. They just
yeah.
still years later.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, it's just so funny how these things, perpetuate and
yeah.
how they must have really heard a lot more stories than we know about in order for them to still be reacting like this.
Right.
So, one time when Zach was in the house, his crew noticed that in one of the bedrooms, the blinds started leaking this oily substance all over them.
Oh.
So they cleaned off the blinds. Remember, they're filming a documentary. There's a lot of people in and
Yeah,
out.
that's true.
So what they did was they cleaned off everything, they shut the door and rigged it so that if someone went in, they would know.
Okay.
So they did that and they went back. No one had gone into the room and the blinds were still had that oily substance back on it.
Okay.
So it was just a little
Yeah.
oddity that was happening there. So black mold was reported in the home by Latoya back when she was living there. Zach uncovered a news clip of when the news was out there talking to her. This is prior to when the possessions escalated. They were just there to talk about the mold. And
Mhm.
so mold can emit high levels of electromagnetic radiation, which can cause hallucinations.
Yes.
So
Okay.
the mold problem, as they thought, was never addressed. So they brought in a home inspector to determine if there are high levels of EMF in the house, because that can attribute to some of what's going on here. And I like Zach's style because he likes to debunk certain things before saying like it's
It's like
fact.
being reasonable. Yeah, like, okay, let's try to cut
Figure
out
out what's
some of
going
these
on.
things. Yeah.
So the inspector found normal levels So they were able to rule that out, but it was interesting because as the inspector was there, again, he started losing track of his thoughts, spacing out, and when he had looked into one of the bathrooms and commented how it just felt off, a shadowy figure was actually picked up on camera in the same spot that he was looking.
Ew.
Then the inspector became, like, really nauseated right after and had to leave the house. So
Oh
he's
my
not someone who's involved in this paranormal stuff, he's
right.
just someone that Zach brought out to test the EMF levels in the home. On another day, one of the former tenants of the house prior to Latoya had gotten wind that they were filming, and she stopped by with her kids. And so Zach was obviously interested to talk to her because this is
Mhm.
prior to Latoya. He wanted to see, obviously, did you have any experiences? And
Right.
she told him how she would have a friend that would constantly be over the house and would sometimes stay there even when they weren't there. And that friend always complained that they heard footsteps when no one was home.
Okay.
She also talked about how her brother committed suicide in the room that was in the basement.
Oh, shit.
Uh-huh. So this was so Zach starting to like, eyebrow raise.
I guess that maybe Indiana's, like, not a state where you have to disclose stuff like that when you
Maybe
sell.
not. And well, and remember, Latoya didn't. Oh, you mean to Zach? Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't. He just bought it. He
Like,
didn't
if
even
you
care.
but anyone, like,
Yeah,
when you buy it, because some states require you
to disclose if there was any murders or deaths in the
murders or
house. Yeah.
deaths, yeah,
Um.
or possible possessions, but
Yeah. Wouldn't that be something?
right?
So while the woman was talking on camera to Zach, her knees gave out and she kind of like looked at one of her kids and like kind of quickly reprimanded them for kicking her. And they were like, we didn't do
Doing
anything. And
it.
when Zach reviewed the footage, he's like, you can see no one moved. And you could clearly see the woman was in mid sentence and boom, her knees just
Oh
gave
my
out.
god.
So she was also mic'd up at this point, and a female voice was caught on her mic when she was looking around the house, just sort of like, like just bringing back memories and just hearing all the things that had gone on there. And
Mhm.
a female voice was picked up on her mic saying, "Run, Latoya." Clear as day.
What?
Isn't that crazy? Like, Latoya's not even there, and they're
Yeah.
still referencing it. Maybe they thought she was her, I don't know.
Or maybe it was, like, the grandmother's spirit, like, her guardian, maybe, like, a little essence of it left in the house
Yeah.
that's still being
They
protective.
call that what is that called? Residual energy.
Yeah.
So this woman, the woman who lived there before, her kids were about high school age. There was 3 of them, and they were there with her, just sort of like thinking it was cool, there's this
Yeah.
cameras, and they were just there kinda asking questions, and again, they started spacing out as they were in the house. And at one point when they had left, Zach is standing in the window watching one of the boys stare back at the house, just like he's like, "What is he doing?" And he was just mesmerized by the house, like almost like in a trance or fixated on it or something. So a few days after that had happened, Zach actually received a call that the one daughter who was there ended up trying to commit suicide
Oh my
out of
god.
nowhere after becoming violent with her mother.
Oh, shit.
The sister said to Zach that she was rolling her eyes back in her head and was not acting like herself at all. Zach actually visited her in the hospital.
Whoa.
And ultimately, the same reverend who performed an exorcism on Latoya and her kids performed one on this girl as well, just for extra measure.
Yeah.
So Zach discovered the home's history even further. A total of 5 people died in this house before Latoya, including the suicide.
Okay.
So you can't help but to wonder if there's some sort of correlation. Your dark energy affects everyone in so many different ways.
Right.
So it is interesting to know that there was these deaths.
Yeah.
So the documentary culminated with Zach sealing himself inside the house alone overnight with nothing but a few cameras and a mic.
Oh.
So he didn't even have a cell phone or like TV to distract himself.
Oh my god.
So during the night, multiple noises were picked up on camera, like someone was moving around the house. Again, it's tiny, so you hear everything. And then when Zach was in the one room trying to rest, he started hearing again noises. And when he sat up, a deep, loud growl happened as though it was like right in front of him. And
Yeah.
it sent him into a panic. I think the documentary kind of ended in that area. So I think he actually ran out of the house.
Whoa.
But it was a very loud growl that you can hear. It was very creepy. So he also recounted how those who were involved in the making of the documentary were affected, just as police Captain Charles Austin had said the officers oftentimes
Right.
would be affected. So this list included numerous crew members who quit because they couldn't handle it anymore.
That's crazy.
His one cameraman seemed to have something dark come over him, causing him to have violent outbursts to the point he had to be terminated. And this was a friend of one of the other, crew members, and he's like, he's never done anything like this before.
And, like, these people have all gone to, like, haunted places,
Yeah,
right?
I think some of them, because this wasn't affiliated with Ghost Adventures. This was
Okay.
completely separate, but Zach had crew members from Ghost Adventures
Right.
with him, but they had other people outside of,
Yeah.
but they knew them before this,
Right.
and they were like, "This
Yeah.
is not normal
Yeah.
behavior."
That's crazy.
So he also had an expert in psychology who was brought in to discuss certain aspects of the case, and this guy ended up in the hospital right after visiting the home. He was affected in the home. You could see him start to kind of feel nauseous. He ended up in the hospital with multiple organs failing, one right after the other.
What?
Mhm. The woman who previously lived there, her daughter tried committing suicide, and it was by stabbing herself multiple times in the wrists.
Oh my god.
And a few others were included in Zach even. He had a violent outburst that was caught on camera. He wasn't mic'd up or anything, but he started to attack one of his best friends who he also works on Ghost Adventures with out of nowhere.
That's crazy.
So it was decided by Zach that the best course of action would be to tear the house down, that it would be better for everyone involved, anyone who in the future would be on that property. So that's exactly what he did, but not before making sure he grabbed a few artifacts from the house that he keeps in his own personal haunted collection. So Zach's documentary is called Demon House. And if you're interested in this case, it was a great documentary. It goes into some of the history of the case, but it is neat to see how these types of locations and landmarks can still affect people even after the family that, made it public,
Right.
even after they were gone.
Yeah.
So it begs the question, is it the house that started this? Is it the family? I'm sure it's different in all cases, but I think with this case, it's probably exactly as the news said, a portal to hell.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
I don't think she was making it up.
No, I mean, the story about the kids that's too extreme. There's some things where, you can kind of like put it on like one side of the list. Okay, this is definitely real. One side of the list, like this is where it could be false. But I mean, there's too many eyewitnesses. There's too many victims of it, like if it's not a portal to hell, it's something else that's like
Well, some
catty
said
corner to hell.
maybe like one of like a mass hysteria type of thing. That was one of the theories that
Okay.
people that came in after were sort of subscribing to this and developing symptoms kind of or exaggerating it. They also ridiculed her for being really open with her story.
Yeah.
But you know what? Like I would do the same cuz I mean you're in shock. I mean
Everyone responds to things differently.
yeah, you can't
Like some
say
people I never shut up.
so you'd be talking to everyone.
Yeah, I would be.
I would be so bewildered and in shock. I would want other people to be like, "Are you witnessing this too? Like, come over
Yeah.
here, see this."
Like if you've ever been somewhere and you found a cold spot,
Yeah, you're like, "Oh my god, come over
come
here."
stand here and feel this. Yeah.
I don't know that I would have my kid walk up the wall backwards and be like, "I'm not going to tell anyone."
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Or
I'd be telling everyone.
also, like, how the hell are you teaching your kid how to walk up the wall backwards if you're the one making this all I mean, it's too much. Like,
Yeah. And I think some people even give her some slack for talking to Hollywood, but I'm not here to judge. Because I know I would be
yeah.
on the Hot Mess Express if this stuff was happening.
Oh my
to me,
god,
for
yeah.
sure.
For sure.
I have to pee.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us on this episode of Hosting Evil. For more information on this case and others, you can visit our website at hostingevilpodcast.com.
And don't forget to check us out on social media at Hosting Evil Podcast.
Until next time, I'm Jess. Peace, love, and light.
And I'm Emily. Keep fighting those demons.
Hosting Evil is recorded and produced by Carly Strange at Rockdale Studios.